No, what did you say, was it 23rd?
Yes.
Okay.
Saturday night the 23rd at 6:30. Pardon me? I'd say we'll start at 6:30. The service takes an hour. We'll eat at 7:30. And then after dinner, there are about 15 minutes more of some prayers to say.
Is this at your house?
No, it's going to be at St. Johannes Gatch Hall, which is a red brick building half a block north of Hazel, where the church is at the corner of Hazel and Anson. It's a nice hall and plenty of room for up to probably 100 people or more. So that should be a fun evening. And if you haven't seen a Passover Seder, it really is a wonderful service. All right, we begin. We were at the healing of the centurion's servant, page 39. Now, we're in a healing unit. When these Gospels are carefully put together with different topics. It looks at first reading as if we have a chronological biography of Jesus, but that's really not the case. Mark grouped different events together. Healings, sayings about the kingdom, conflicts with Pharisees, predictions of the Passion, the last week in Jerusalem. Everything is arranged topologically rather than chronologically. There is a chronological framework. We begin with the birth of Jesus in Matthew, and we end with the resurrection, of course. But within that, these gospel writers are really creating a scenario of events in Jesus' life, and we have no idea whether this reflects the actual order of events in Jesus' life. There's no way to get behind the Gospels 30, 40 years back to when Jesus actually walked the earth. So we have Jesus, as I've said, as a character in 4 novellas called the Gospels. And they're very carefully constructed. So now we have after the end of the Sermon on the Mount, we have a number of healings. And this could be called a sub-unit within the Gospel. First, the healing of a leper, which is episode 45 here in verse 38. The leper is presumably Jewish, and that's the point. Jesus has come for the Jews and to help and heal them. Then the centurion's servant, healing number 2. He, of course, is a Gentile, a Roman, and his servant is healed, meaning Jesus has come for the Gentiles too. Matthew is very concerned with winning over Jews. But he really seems to understand that the future of the church is with Gentiles. He has the wise men who are Gentiles in the very beginning, the first people to recognize Jesus. And then at the end, a Roman centurion. He's in all the Gospels, and he says who Jesus is. So, and then Jesus has the Great Commission in Matthew. When he appears to his disciples, the resurrected Christ says, go to all the nations. In Hebrew, kol goyim. Go to the goyim, go to the non-Jewish nations, and bring them in. The old hymn, bring them in, bring them in, bring them in from the fields of sin. I sang that Easter morning. I called a friend of mine and I said, which church are you going to? He said, I wasn't planning to go. His brother's a priest. I said, Easter, you're going to church. And I took him to Holy Communion, which is a great church on Ashley with smells and bells, as they say. Wonderful incense swinging and dress up and all that. I mean, this is what the age of ecumenism, where a Jew drags a Christian to church on Easter morning. I love holidays. I wouldn't miss one. All right. So you have the healing of a Jew, then of a Gentile, the servant of the Roman soldier, and he heals him by the word. All these healings are either by laying on of hands or just the verbal word. Either one. Good. And we'll have others next week and the week after. Now he's going to have a third healing in this healing unit. Page 41, verse 8:14. When Jesus entered Peter's house. Now this is really out of context. In Mark is more, the structure in Mark makes more sense. Jesus goes to synagogue on a Saturday morning and then goes to Peter's house for lunch, which is very typical of the way things are done. If I'm visiting a city where I'm not known and I go to the local synagogue on Saturday, someone's bound to ask me, a stranger, to come to lunch, and it's very nice. So Jesus is having lunch at Peter's house. Peter's his closest associate. When Jesus enters Peter's house, there's a problem. His mother-in-law is lying in bed with a fever. Now, a demon isn't possessing her. It's just a cold or the flu. He touched her hand, healing by touch, and the fever left her. And why was he so eager to cure her? Because he wanted lunch. And she got up and began to serve them. Again, all of this, every one of the three healings is about the authority of Jesus. And this is a main issue in all the Gospels. He's not just a rabbi, he's not just a prophet. He can do stuff that no people like that could do. And, well, Elijah did things like that, but he was more than the prophet. He went to heaven in a fiery chariot. So he's one of those Old Testament characters who never died. And he's supposed to come back to announce the coming of the Messiah. John the Baptist plays the Elijah role in the Christian story here. All right, so now he healed a third person, and of course Peter's mother-in-law is Jewish. So he heals a Jew, he heals a Gentile, he heals a Jew. And now we summarize it. Very often Mark and Matthew have some summary verses after a series to close off that section. Verse 16. That evening they brought to him many who were possessed with demons. That's another kind of healing. And he has authority over demons because of his supernatural power. And he cast out the spirits with a word. Now it's with the word. Word, touch, word. He can do it either way. And cured all who were sick. This is the summation. And now Matthew, and only Matthew, would add verse 17. Because Matthew is obsessed with Jesus fulfilling the Jewish scriptures to convince his Jewish readers. And he doesn't mind tweaking or twisting the meaning, the plain meaning of a text. The rabbis in the Talmud talk about the plain meaning of a text, and then they can, what could be the word? Exfoliate, that's not quite so, on the meaning and come up with wild meanings. We used to play a game at Columbia University it was a parody of a quiz show called, you had a panel, we were all philosophy students, and the leader had the Bible in his hand, and we'd call it Twist That Text. And he'd say, welcome viewers, we're pretending we're on television, to twist that text. And I'll read the text and we'll see which of our panelists can twist it more out of recognition and shape than anybody else. And we came up with wild things. I once, when I was at the American Academy of Religion convention in Atlanta, it's an annual meeting of crazed theologians who get together from all over the country and fight and argue with each other. And amateurs who aren't professors or haven't published, they just have ideas and they want someone to read about them. So they publish their own things in mimeograph sheets and they hand them out in the lobbies of the hotels. And the funniest one was, I have found an elephant in the Bible. This man was quite mad, and he had spent his life finding on every page of the Bible references to elephants. Absolute nonsense. And yet he had a picture of an elephant on the cover, and he was absolutely convinced that for some obscure reason, God was bringing the elephant before us on every page of the Bible. That's the wildest, but they get very peculiar. Now look at this. This is very strange. Why did he cure all these people? Verse 17. This was to fulfill, again, fulfillment of Old Testament, very big in Matthew, what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah. And indeed, in chapters 53 of Isaiah, Isaiah is talking about the suffering servant of God He took our infirmities and bore our diseases. Well, it's a paraphrase. But it doesn't fit here at all. It doesn't mean he cured other people's colds and flu and demon possession. It means that the servant, whoever he was, and Christians understand him to be Jesus, and Jews understand him to be the collective individual, the Jewish people, suffers for the sins of the world and takes upon himself our sins, our infirmities, our spiritual sicknesses, which is sin. Now that is the classic understanding of what Jesus accomplished on the cross. He took upon himself our burden of sin. So he paid it, and we are now free to go and to be with him. Sinners that we are. We're redeemed sinners. When you think about it, only a sinner can be redeemed. Because if we weren't sinners, we wouldn't have to be redeemed by another. So we are redeemed sinners. And God deals with us as if we weren't sinners. Why? For the sake of the sacrifice of his beloved Son. Now that's what the verse means classically in the Christian interpretation of it. But this is really very strange. He's so eager to show that everything Jesus did fulfilled some verse in the Old Testament that I think in this case he really misapplies it. But, all right, I mean, the verses are in the public domain, and you can make of them what you want. All right, so there you have the series of cures. Now, some of these sections overlap, and maybe we'll see that here. After the three cures of a Jew, a Gentile, and a Jew, so Jesus is for everyone and has authority, we have two inquiries. The reader might wonder, who is this Jesus? Now that we've seen he can cure Gentiles and Jews. So we have Matthew 8:18. Now when Jesus saw great crowds around him, and the crowds harass him and keep him from having peace of mind. So that's why he tells people, don't tell I cured you. He doesn't always tell them. In Mark he tells them always when they're in Jewish territory. Sometimes here he does. That's called the messianic secret. I don't want to be mobbed by people. Not yet. People don't have to know yet. But people are asking, who is he? When Jesus saw great crowds around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. The other side of what? The other side of the Sea of Galilee. From Jewish territory in Galilee, picture in your mind the map. You've got the Mediterranean Sea, you've got the rich fields and hills of Galilee, beautiful area even today. The Sea of Galilee, where Christian pilgrims love to swim. I went for a swim there with a bunch of the most ecstatic Baptists I've ever met. And then over the sea, it's so wide you can't see one side. If you're on one side, you can't see the other. It's big. And it's a lake, though, an enormous lake. And then on the other side is what would be called the Golan Heights today, which is Syrian territory, now occupied by the Israeli army, because when the Syrians had it, they would shoot down into Galilee and shoot the farmers as they were farming. So the Israelites took it over. But it was Gentile territory, obviously, in this time. So he's going to cross over to avoid the Jewish crowds who are hearing about him more and more. He wants to go to new territory. What does this mean? Matthew is telling us, his readers, he is for Gentiles as well as Jews. Maybe focusing on Jews, but they're also Gentiles. Now when Jesus saw great crowds about him, he gave orders to go over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. They're going to cross in a boat, but not yet. Before he has a chance to get into the boat, verse 19, a scribe, now obviously a Jew, the scribes, there were some scribes attached to the Pharisee movement, the rabbis, the interpreters of text, and there were some scribes attached to the Sadducees, the priests in Jerusalem. These are clearly Pharisee scribes. What is a scribe? A professional writer. The average person couldn't write. So a lot of people could read, because to be a good Jew, you had to read the Torah, you had to be able to read Scripture. So the Greeks came up with the idea of universal male literacy, but the Jews came closer to actually realizing it, because they really tried to teach everyone to read the Scriptures. But writing was a professional skill. So the Pharisee movement, what we can call the Rabbis' Union for our understanding, had scribes attached to it who would copy the great text. And then the Pharisees, the Perushim, the interpreters, would interpret them. So this is a scribe who works with the Pharisees. And remember, there's some Pharisees who are very friendly to Jesus, there's some Pharisees who are hostile. Most of the time he's interacting with them, which suggests he himself is a Pharisee. You argue with people closest to you. But if he is a Pharisee, he's of the left wing of the Pharisees. Very weak on ritual and very strong on ethics. Or he may not be connected to the Pharisees. He may be a freelance healer and preacher. And that would explain their annoyance with him because he doesn't have a union card, that's all. A scribe then approached and said, "Teacher," rabbi, it would be rabbi in the original, "I will follow you wherever you go." So this is a Pharisee connected scribe who's extremely friendly. He sees Jesus as a great religious leader, at least as a rabbi. "I want to follow you," which gives Jesus the platform to say one of the most remarkable sayings in our literature. "And Jesus said to him, 'Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.'" Now, it sounds like he's just saying, "Follow me," and in one of the Gospels he says, "Follow me, foxes have holes," etc. I'm a wanderer in the earth. I have no place. I don't fit in anywhere. I have this intense consciousness of not fitting in. And I walk from one place to another in Israel with my followers who are also misfits and outcasts and tax collectors and bums. And I've redeemed them, and we go through the world preaching the Word of God. But I don't fit in anywhere. It's a poignant statement. You want to leave your comfortable home and follow me? Well, through Matthew, Jesus is saying that to us. There's something uncomfortable about being a Christian. Now, there's also something comfortable. Let's face it. We come here, I come to this church, we sing hymns, we're with our friends, we're middle-class people, we're very comfortable, an hour in church in the morning on Sunday, and then we go and have lunch in one of the wonderful brunches and buffets here. It's a very establishment, comfortable, normal thing to do. Religion has become domesticated in America. And we believe in it, but we don't take it so seriously that it's going to cause us to do something wild and strange. Well, in those days, to be a Christian really meant more than that. The establishment Jews were against you. The establishment Gentiles, the Romans, were against you. You risk your life. You want to follow me, he's saying? What is it to be a Christian in Red China? Or in the Soviet Union, no more Soviet Union, so you can be Orthodox. Can you be a Protestant that? You can't be a Jehovah's Witness. What is it to be a Christian in the Middle East, where they're murdered by the crazies of ISIS and others? In Pakistan, Easter Sunday morning, the Taliban set up a bomb and killed God knows how many people. They set it up near a children's swing set in a park. So Christians going out after church to celebrate Easter with their families, there'd be maximum slaughter. What can go on in the mind of such people? They think this is what Allah wants them to do. There's a kind of madness abroad in the world. Well, that's what it means to be a Christian in those parts of the world. And that's how we have to hear it. This was said, Jesus speaking through Matthew, or Matthew speaking through Jesus, to the early Christians of his day. If you join us, you'll have no place to lay your head. So it's not just Jesus, it's Christians in a difficult time and age and location for Christians, but it's more than that. Its profundity is greater than that. Foxes have holes, birds have trees or wherever they go. They have nests. That's true. Animals are born finished. They're born programmed by instinct to do what they do. You don't have to tell a mother duck how to teach her little ducklings how to swim. They just know everything. We don't. Human beings are born unfinished. So I think by Son of Man, he also means all of us. We have no place to lay our head. We have this gnawing feeling that we don't quite belong here. All the pussycats and puppy dogs just do what they do without thinking. We have to think about everything. We're born unfinished by instinct. We have to finish ourselves. And we finish ourselves by building civilizations and cultures, by rituals. Look at the ritual of eating in Charleston and everywhere else. You could just go in a field and get some food and stuff it in your mouth. We go into a restaurant. We dress up. We sit down. The waiter comes. There's a menu. It's a ritual. It's not unlike church. We ritualize eating. Food courses came to America at Delmonico's restaurant in the 1830s. Before that, they just threw everything on the table and everyone dived for it. It's very elegant now. Rules and regulations, how to hold the fork, how to hold the knife, what to do with the napkin, all of this kind of thing. And we ritualize life. We're trying to give it meaning through giving it structure. So everything we see and experience, our whole civilization, is an attempt to make us feel at home here. And yet somehow we don't. We're strangers in the earth. And so we talk about heaven, some place which will welcome us home. Many hymns that I listen to hymns all the time, there's evangelical hymns, and they talk about heaven as home. That means this isn't quite home, not quite comfortable on this earth. There's something missing. And so we reach out to God, to the infinite, to the eternal, and hope that someday we'll come to a place where we'll be welcomed and be fully at home. So it's a comment about human nature and our sense of dislocation, strangers in the earth. The Son of Man means Jesus, means the early church, and it also means every one of us, I think. So there's great psychological insight here. So, first an inquiry. Let me follow you. It's not so easy to follow me. And he points out the problem of being human. Verse 21, a second inquiry. Another, this time of his disciples, said to him, Lord, first tell me to go and bury my father. I want to join you, or I have just joined you, but I just heard my father had died. Now, this is a repetition of an episode in the book of Kings where Elijah is the prophet, and he calls Elisha, his assistant prophet, who's going to take his place when he leaves. And Elisha says, first I have to go home and say goodbye to my parents. He's a young man, he's leaving home, and Elijah says, go, for what have I done to you? I'm bringing you into a new life as a prophet. But of course you have to say goodbye to your parents. The Jews are a very family-oriented people. Now today we talk about the Christian family. But Jesus didn't talk about that. He talked about the church being the family. Jesus doesn't seem to be big on family. Now that's a little disturbing news to Christian family folk, which most Christians are, because we've domesticated his message. But it was a radical message. At one point he says, leave your parents. All right. Leave your wife. All right. Leave your children. Unthinkable to the average Jew. Leave your home. Yes. Your property. Yes. Your money. Yes. But your wife and your children? Jesus is a radical thinker. And he says when his mother comes to fetch him, because she thinks he's being overwhelmed by the crowd, they say, your family's out there, your mother and brothers are out there waiting for you. He says, who are my mother and brothers? Those who follow me and do what I say are my mother, my brother, and my sister. He seems to reject his blood family. Even in John, they're at a wedding feast, and they need wine. The host is the nightmare. The host has run out of wine. So Jesus' mother says, my son, the Messiah, he'll fix it. And do something, Jesus. He said, mother, leave me alone, woman. And then she nags him, and he says, woman, what have I to do with you? That's no way to talk to your mommy. Finally, he acquiesces, as we all do. We listen to mommy, and he says, you have any water? Okay, zap, it's wine. Go ahead, drink the wine. And it's better wine than what Mr. Ginsburg had been giving his wedding gifts. So it's great wine. In any case, there's passage after passage where he has trouble with his blood family. He doesn't seem to stress that at all. And he calls people to leave the family, if necessary, to follow him. And in the church, in my community, you'll find brothers and mothers and fathers and sisters. That's why in the Catholic Church you have father this and mother that and sister this and brother that. It's a family. And in those days, when you became a Christian, you were cut off from your family, whether it was Jewish or Roman. And so that's what this is about. I want to bury my father. That is an absolutely sacred duty in the Jewish religion. My brother and I, accompanied with other family members, my father's body to the grave. We lowered him down and we shoveled the earth onto the casket. The last service you can do for your father, who to you is a king. Now this boy wants to go back and bury his father. And Jesus says, don't bother. It's shocking. Jesus said, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. Now, in terms of the literal situation, he's breaking with Jewish custom and Jewish law. But there's a larger issue here. Matthew is saying, for the new teachings of Jesus, we need a new reality. And the old law is dead. It's going to be fulfilled in Jesus. It doesn't mean we abandon it exactly, but we fulfill it. If Jesus becomes your link to the Father in heaven, then he can replace your Father on earth. In Judaism, you can't, it's all put together. You honor your Father as you honor God, and vice versa. But here, that's why we call God Father. But there seems to be an either or in the teachings of Jesus. Now, why would he think that way, if I'm right about it? And it makes us uncomfortable, but at least that's the way I read it. Because I don't think Jesus thought this world had very long to last. In Mark, it's quite clear. The Son of Man is coming back very soon. He never exactly says, I'm coming back. So some scholars say he didn't identify as the Son of Man. He thought he was preparing for another. So originally Jesus played the Elijah function to the coming of the Messiah. But the Christian belief over 2,000 years has been when he says the Son of Man in the third person, he means himself. Certainly Mark thought he did. But Mark believed he was coming back day after tomorrow. Paul believed that. When you get to the Gospel of Matthew, 15 or 20 years after Mark, they're beginning to weaken in that belief. Maybe it'll be an extended time before he gets back. The parousia, the return of Christ, we may have some time to wait. I don't think they had any notion it would be 2,000 years. But maybe long. But here and there, since Matthew doesn't want to take Mark and stuff out, being a Jew, he has such a respect for the inherited text, you have these passages which indicate that Jesus thinks that the Son of Man, perhaps himself, is coming back very quickly. So that would explain his impatience with family ties. And his insistence that you give up everything to the poor and follow him as a pauper, but you'll be rich in the spirit. In Judaism, if you believe the end of days is not yet, the Ketz Yamim, the end is in the distant future, then, as I've said before, you give 10% of your income to charity. You must, but no more than 20%, because your family deserves 80% of what you make. But that's a long-range ethic. Jesus' ethic is give everything away. That's a short-range ethic. Well, he was wrong about that. The world didn't end, and he didn't return. But the church came. So we entered a new age, in a sense. And the church, it shows that when they were disappointed that Jesus didn't return quickly, they adjusted and made themselves a long-range institution. Matthew is beginning to do that. He takes the urgency away from it, but yet he leaves some passages about the Son of Man coming soon. We'll see one in a minute. And Luke takes out even more and takes away the immediacy. And he says there will be an age of the Gentiles in which the gospel will be spread throughout the world, and then you will see the Son of Man come back. That could be thousands of years in the future. Luke makes his peace with the long delay of the parousia. Matthew is struggling with it. But passages like this indicate that Jesus' original sentiment was the world's going to end pretty soon. Now, were there some questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Well, it's a strange story, and I wonder the veracity of it, because in Jewish custom and
Immediately, and this must have been very quick. He just heard. You have to bury him within 24 hours. He just heard, and he asked his teacher, "Can I go and bury my father?" And the answer would be, "Of course, go and bury your father and then come back." But Jesus uses it for an occasion to push away a family obligation that is one of the central sacred obligations in Judaism. And how does Matthew use this? He uses it to show, as he will say in a minute, for new wine, Jesus teaching, you need new wineskins. You need a new understanding of the world. And of course, we have the Christian family now, of course, because most people are family people. But in the Roman Church, the ideal man and woman are virgins. No sex, priest, none, no marriage, no children. That's the ideal. The ideal woman is a virgin mother. Now, only one woman ever managed that. So if you can't be a virgin mother, you can be a virgin. That's the top. If you can't be that, then marriage for Paul is clearly a giving into the flesh. I'd rather you be like me, he said, apparently celibate. But then get married and have lots of children and be a Christian mama. So the ideal is no family, and the second level fallback position is have a family with lots of kids and have a Christian home. But these passages set up a new ideal of non-involvement in family and involvement in this new family, which is the church. All right. Something to think about. Yes, ma'am.
In regards to time, if a day is like 1,000 years.
Well, I wouldn't get into that. That's a metaphor. This means this Jewish boy just heard his father died. He's got to bury him. And Jesus says, no.
How about honoring your mother and father?
Very difficult. Oh, he says, don't do that either. He says, honor your mother and your father. He says, no, you've got to hate your family for my sake. Hate doesn't mean hate them emotionally. It means turn away to something higher. Get rid of anything that you love more than God. Now, you have that in the beginning of the Israelite tradition. You have that with Matthew. With Abraham. Remember, God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. Now, we, the readers, know it's just a test, but Abraham didn't know that. But once that terrible, unbelievable, unthinkable request is made, after that, it's all family, family, family. In Christianity, there's a very ambivalent attitude toward family in Catholic Christianity. Less so in the Protestant version. All right, so we have these readings, and you can do what you want with them. The most difficult readings here is when they don't agree with our attitude today. For Jews to read about the Abraham story is shocking and horrifying. Because Abraham's like our granddad. He'd kill his son? What sense would that make? Oh, I had such trouble in synagogue classes over the years with very ethical people who love their children, of course, and they just said, this